All right, so this is section 6.1 of your book, okay? It is about factoring. So all of chapter 6 is going to be about factoring, and we're going to go over about 5 or 6 different kinds of strategies that you can use to factor, okay? So these first two are called greatest common factor and grouping, okay? So factoring out the greatest common factor, what we're going to do here is we're going to look for the largest number, okay? The largest number that divides evenly into the coefficient of all the terms. So those are the numbers, right? Coefficient means the numbers that are attached to the variable, right? So the largest number that divides evenly into all the coefficients. And then when it comes to our variables, we're going to look for a common variable, and we're going to take out the variable with the smallest exponent, okay? So we're going to take out the variable with the smallest exponent because we only can take out what's in common, right? So if we have exponents, they only have in common the smallest of all of them, right? Okay, so, and then this says if we write prime, that means it does not factor, okay? That means we can't factor it. All right, so let's do some examples of these. All right, so that first one says 10x squared plus 4x, okay? So looking at the coefficients, looking at the numbers, what can we take out, right? What's the largest number that divides evenly into both numbers, right? Right, you can go, okay, well, 10, factors of 10 are 1 and 10, 2 and 5. Factors of 4 are 1 and 4, 2 and 2, right? And the only one that they have in common is 2. That's the biggest one. They have 1 in common, but 2 is bigger than 1. So we can take out a 2. And then when it comes to your variables, you're going to take out the smallest exponent. So we have x squared and x, so we're going to take out x. Now, you have to account for what's left. Okay, so we took out a 2x from 10x squared. So what's left over? That's what goes in your parentheses, whatever's left over. So 2 times 5 gives us 10. And then we took out an x from x squared, so we have an x left over, right? The way you can check yourself is multiply back through, right? Distribute back through. 2x times 5x gives you 10x, okay? And then for the second term, 2 times 2 gives you 4, and then you took out an x and you only had an x. So 2x times 2, right? We're checking 2x times 2 gives you 4x, right? So this is your answer. Okay, that's all you do. All right, let's keep going. Let's do the same thing here. If you need to go over here and list all your factors, that's perfectly fine. Hopefully you'll get good enough to where you can just think of those factors, but we can always go over here and do this. Okay, so our biggest number that they have in common is 4. So we can take out a 4, and we can take out an x squared because that's our smallest exponent. Okay, now we have to see what's left. Okay, so well, 4 times 5 gives us 20, and we took 2 x's from 4, so we have 2 left over, right? Because when we multiply back through here, we add our exponents, right? So that's 20x to the 4th, and then minus 2. So 4 times 2 is 8, and we took out all of our x's, right? We had x squared, and we took out x squared. So that's our answer. All right, let's keep going. The only difference here and between this one and the other one is we have 2 variables running around instead of just 1. Okay, but so we're still gonna start the same way. We're gonna look at our coefficients. We're gonna look at our numbers, and we're gonna say, okay, what's the largest number that divides evenly into both of these? And it is 10, right? 10 goes into 30, 10 goes into 10. We can take out just one x because that's smallest, right, between our x's. And then we can take out All right, we have y cubed and y squared, so we can take out the smallest one, y squared. Okay, now we're going to see what's left over. So we're going to do, okay, well, 3 times 10 is 30, right? And then for x, I would have 1 left over. And then for y, I would also have 1 left over. And then look what you took out and what you started with for the second term. You took out 10x y squared, and you have 10x y squared. So you took everything out. So if we're thinking about, okay, and I'm going to have a minus there, I need to multiply 10x y squared by something to get 10x y squared. Well, the only thing that you can multiply that by is 1, right? 10x y squared times 1 gives you 10x y squared, right? So if you take everything out, you'll always have that 1 there in that placeholder. Okay. So we're getting a little more complicated. Now we have 3 terms, but we're still going to do the same thing. Things have to be in common between all 3 terms now, not just 2 terms. Okay. So we have 15, 3, and 12. Well, 3 goes into all of those. And then we're going to look at our x. So we have x to the 4th, x to the 3rd, x to the 4th. So we take out our smallest one. And y, we have 6, 5, and 4. So we're going to take out 4. So that's our smallest y. Now we're going to see what we have left over. Well, 3 times 5 gives us 15. We have 1 x left over and 2 y's left over, right? So if we did this, 3 plus 1 is 4. 4 plus 2 is 6. Okay, we'll keep going. We had a 3, we took out a 3. Okay, so if you want to put a 1 right here, you can, or you don't have to put that. And then we took out all of our x's, right? 3, and we took out 3. So nothing there. And then we have y left over, right? Okay, so you can write -1 y to the first, or you could just write y, right? And if you multiplied that back through, you would have 3x to the 3rd, y to the 5th, which is what we would need. Okay, and then plus 4x to the 4th, and we took out 3, so we have 1 left over, and we took out all of our y's, right? So we're done. All right, so when they get long like this, it really helps for you to just break it down. Do your numbers first, then your x's, then your y's each time. Okay. For this one, we can take out, we're starting with our numbers, we can take out 10, right? 10 goes into 30, 10 goes into 10, but we can't take out any variables because this one doesn't even have a variable in it, right? It's just a constant, it's just a number. And greatest common factor is the largest one that they have in common. So they both terms have to have it, both terms do not have it. So what's left over is 3x, right? 3x times 10 would give us 30x. And then 10 times 1 would give us 10. Okay. One more like this, okay? X squared plus 7x. We can't take out a number, right? So there's an understood 1 right there. So we're looking for the greatest common factor between 1 and 7. Well, it's just 1, right? Which doesn't do any good for us to write 1, right? But we can take out an x still. So we have, what we have left over is x, because that would give us x squared plus 7. Okay, so all of these examples right here are really good for greatest common factor, okay? And greatest common factor, the reason we go over it first is number 1, we're going to use the greatest common factor in grouping in our next method, okay? But it is always going to help for you guys to take out the greatest common factor first if there is one. In all of our strategies that we use, your first thing that you're going to do is look for the greatest common factor. There might not always be one, but if there is one, it's going to make your life a whole lot easier when you take it out, okay? This blue line says whenever the first term is negative, you must factor out the negative sign. All factoring out a negative sign does is switch the sign you had, okay? All it does is switch the sign you have. Okay, so here's the example of that. Negative 4x plus 12. We can take out a negative 4. Okay, what that does is it switches the sign inside this sign. It switches that sign, right? Because negative 4 times x is negative 4x. But it's going to be minus 3 because we want to say negative 4 times negative 3 and get positive 12, right? A negative times a negative is a positive. So just a little thing there that's going to make a whole lot of more sense in a second whenever we're going to manipulate some stuff and use that technique when we take out that negative. Okay, so we can go even more complicated here, and we would take out a negative 4x. So that would leave us with x squared plus 8, right? Minus 8. I just made the rule and then didn't use it. Here we go. Minus 8. 8 times 4 is 32. X. And then we'll say plus, right? Our signs are going to be different. We're going to flip them. We're going to flip them. Plus 5. Okay. Just like that. So not vastly different than what we just did a bunch of times. Okay. So that was greatest common factor. Now we're going to factor by grouping. Okay. We're going to factor by grouping. And we try to factor by grouping whenever there's 4 terms. Okay. So there's going to come a point when you have 5 or 6 strategies to use that you can use. And I'm not telling you, hey, factor by grouping, factor by greatest common factor. I'm just saying factor. And you have to figure out which strategy that you need to use. Okay. The way that you know that you need to group is there are 4 terms. Okay. And here are the steps to do that. You're going to group 2 and 2. So you're going to group the first 2 together and the last 2 together. Then you're going to factor out the greatest common factor from each. So you're going to take the first 2 and say, what's the greatest common factor of that? Then you're going to look at the second 2 terms and say, what's the greatest common factor of that one? Then you're going to get matching parentheses. This piece right here is your checkpoint to know if you're doing it right. If you take out the greatest common factor of both terms and what's inside your parentheses, what's left over is not the same, then you're wrong. Okay. Once you get your matching parentheses, you're going to write that once and then put the other 2 terms, whatever's left over, in the other set. Okay. So it's kind of like backwards foiling. Okay. So let's see if we can do that with those instructions. Okay. So here we go. We have 4 terms, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. We're going to group the first 2 terms and the last 2 terms. Notice how I left that plus alone in the middle. Okay, leave that middle sign alone. All right. The greatest common factor of the blue is just x, right? We can't take out a number because it's 1, understood 1, and 2. Well, the greatest common factor of that is 1, right? That doesn't help us. But we can take out an x and we're left with x plus 2. Okay, bring this middle sign down and take out the greatest common factor of the pink, which would be 4. And you're left with x plus 2. Sorry. Okay. Here's your checkpoint. You should notice that those two are the same. Okay, that should happen every single time. Your parentheses should be the same. So that becomes one set of parentheses for your answer. Okay, the other set of parentheses is just everything else. So you have an x and a plus 4. Okay, and you're done. That's the answer. Okay, group the first two, group the last two, greatest common factor of each. Same thing in the parentheses, write your answer. Okay. So if we keep going, we'll group the first two. We'll group the last two. Greatest common factor of the blue is x. And we're left with x plus 3. Bring your sign down. This time it's negative. And we're going to take out a 5 from the pink, okay? So you're left with x and 3, right? But you took out a negative 5, so you need to flip this sign, right? That's what we just went over just a second ago. That if your greatest common factor is negative, right, you flip the sign. Okay. Also, just a hint, these two need to match. So you would not put minus right there with your 3. Okay. So that means x plus 3 and everything else in the other set. So x minus 5. Okay. Just 2 more of these. All right. So this one looks a little bit different, but we're going to do the same thing. Okay. It has an x and a y in there, but nothing changes. Still 4 terms. Let's see if we can do grouping. First 2, last 2. Right. Greatest common factor of the blue. Right. They both have an x in common. And I'm left with y minus 5. Bring that middle term down. Greatest common factor of the pink is just 9. And I'm left with y minus 5. Which is great because that means our parentheses are the same. So we have y minus 5. Okay, and everything else. X plus 9. All right. One more. Okay. Blue, pink, first 2, last 2. Greatest common factor of the blue. Okay. X squared. So this time we can take out x squared and we're left with 4x minus 1. Bring down that negative sign. For this one, we can take out a 3, right? The greatest common factor between 12 and 3 is 3. And we're left with 4x, right? We took out a negative 3. So this sign right here needs to change to negative in our parentheses. 1. They match. That's our checkpoint. So that becomes one set. Everything else is the other set. Okay. And that is grouping. Okay, so we went over 2 types of factoring strategies: greatest common factor and grouping.